Hi again. This is the second in the short videos to get you interested and introduced into SolidWorks and using it for design. So let's pick up where we left off in the first video, which was in working in the part environment. Now if you go back to the previous one, you'll see that I started up SolidWorks as a part, and I walked you through what the different basic parts of this screen are. Now the place where we're going to work the most will be in the graphics area, and I also mentioned that this design tree configuration is really important. I'm sure that didn't look that important at the time because it's the basics now. Nothing is here. So let's get started on actually making something. First of all, you'll notice in the configuration manager that if you hover your mouse over the front plane, this orange, a front plane shows up, a top plane and a right plane. Now these are by default are invisible. It's kind of nice to know that it's there, and so if you use your right mouse button, I'm assuming that you've got a three button mouse, which has a right button, which I'll click on mine now, which gives you menus on whatever you're hovering over. You've got a left button for your index finger if you're right-handed, which would give you a different set of tools. And then there's the center button and a center wheel. And so as we go through these videos, I'll use those terms. I'm sorry I can't show you which button I'm clicking when I do it. I'll have to make sure I tell you. So for starters, if I right-click over that front plane, and you'll see that there's these icons up here, which are for different things. I'm just going to click Show. That's the little eyeball. And if I do that, then now all the time, no matter what I do, that plane is visible. Now, what you just saw me do there was I moved my mouse over the graphics area, and I held down the center button or the center wheel. And if you hold it down, you'll see that there's a little rotation blue symbol that comes up, and that lets you kind of roll the thing that you're looking at around. You can get yourself really mixed up when you do that. But fortunately, you can look up here to this heads-up view of presets or of orientation presets, and if you click the middle one that looks like a blue square with things off the side of it, and you just click that, you'll come up to this box, which you can also hold the center mouse down and roll around. Oops, sorry about that. And if you click any side of that, you can get the view from that perspective. If you roll the wheel of your mouse in and out, you can scale it up and down. If you do something foolish like you lose the piece, like I just did, I just rolled my mouse all the way out to infinity, and you actually want to come back to a view that you can see, up here if you hover your mouse over the zoom to fit, it comes back. And you can play around with some of the other buttons. Some of them do other things related to the part we're going to build. So that's just a really first start to using this. I'm just going to roll this around something like that. Now I could also go to this cube again and click the front, and it's there in plane with the view screen. But I can always just roll it around whatever way I like. Okay, that wasn't that much fun, so let's do something that is fun. Up here in the top, there is the command manager toolbar, and you'll see that the things that are not grayed out are things that in whatever work environment you are in, you could do. So we could start out with an extruded boss base. Now that would be like pushing something through a mold, as in Play-Doh, to create something. we can either just go ahead right now and click this, which I just did with my right mouse button, and then it's asking me in the left-hand window to select a plane on which to sketch the cross-section of the thing I want to make. So if I do that, let's say I'm going to do it on the front plane. It rolls the front plane into view, and you'll notice that on the left-hand side, this new thing has appeared. It's called a sketch, sketch 1. You'll also notice that in the graphics window, or the graphics area, that these two new symbols have popped up in the right-hand corner. The red X, which would be to delete what you're working on, and this blue arrow thing, which is the kind of accept button. So those are at least how I know that I'm actually now working on a sketch. And that's the sketch we're working on. The reason why it's beneath this gray bar on the left-hand side is that the gray bar is telling you how far the model has actually been created. So this gray bar, when we make this part, will keep on rolling past this sketch. So now that we're in the sketch, the tab up at the top has these new commands that are not grayed out that are possible for us to work with. We could add a line, we could create a circle, we could create a rectangle. Let's start with a rectangle. If I just hover my mouse after clicking the rectangle button on the plane, doesn't matter where, I could click it up here as well, anywhere, and I click the first one click, and now I've raised my finger off the mouse and I'm just dragging it around. So I'm not holding anything down to do this. And that's one of the things that is often frustrating, because different CAD packages have a different kind of standard for whether you hold the mouse button down or you don't. But in this case, one click gives you the corner, and then it's waiting for us to give the next click for the other corner. And I just did that. And you know, I didn't even care how big it was. And so if I'm happy with that, now the tool that's active, I could draw another square too, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to leave this one. And if I go up to the right and I click this blue arrow, it's come out of the sketch and it's into this Boss Extrude tool. Up in the top toolbar, everything's grayed out, because now what I need to be doing is finishing up the extrusion or the boss part that I started to create. In this case, I could grab this little arrow and I can drag the depth of the part that I'm going to create to some number, or, and this is usually how I work it, is I could type in a number here. I could type in 40, and it would be 40 millimeters by default in the way that my package is set up. Yours might be in inches. I could type in 2 inches, and it would create the equivalent in millimeters. I could type in 25 centimeters, and it would do that in millimeters. I'm going to go back to make it 40 millimeters. So it does the conversions for you. The nice thing about working in CAD is that the environment in which you're working is infinite. It can be either as small as you like or as big as you like. A lot of the parts that I make, I spend my time working at sub-millimeter scales in terms of design, and then have to focus out to see things on a normal scale. So with that, there's a bunch of other options here, but we're not going to worry about them at this point. You can play with them if you like. You'll see that there's a green arrow or an X, or the same thing over here in the upper right hand corner of the graphics window. I'm going to click the green arrow, and now two things have happened. One is our part is now looking gray, and it looks like a solid part. It's, in my case, has a shadow and has a reflection. The other thing you notice is that this little bar over on the left-hand side in the configuration manager, the design tree, has moved down below this thing called Boss Extrude 1. I could roll this back up, and we're back to the state where what things were like before I made that part. But I'm going to move it back to here. Now I could leave that that boss extrude 1 as called boss extrude 1, a default name. Sometimes it's helpful to remember the part that you just made by giving it a new name. I just called it base block. There. So that's all pretty easy. We could make a lot more of this base block. We could go back and put a cut in it, or we could go back even, and if you right click on the base block, you'll see that these tools come up, and each of them allows us to go back and edit the part. So I'm going to go back and edit the sketch that I did. So recall when I first made this, I actually created this rectangular sketch. I'm going to look at this, and maybe what I really wanted to do was put a hole in it. I guess the thunder and lightning that's here this afternoon didn't want that hole in it, but we'll just go with it anyway. And with that, if I click accept, now it's assumed that that was a hole. And now that hole, all it was included in the sketch, which is shown here, and it's now a hole through the block. There's other things that we can do with this as well. For instance, if I go back to the sketch and I edit the sketch again, maybe I didn't really want to make it just a general kind of unknown dimension. And so you'll see if I go back and edit the sketch, all of these sketch tools up at the top are now available again. And if I click Smart Dimension, and you'll see that the symbol beside the cursor is changed, and if I click on the top line, that's giving me a dimension of 108.867724 millimeters. Probably not what I wanted. Maybe I want that to be 100 millimeters. Well, if I type it there, it makes it 100 millimeters. I could also, because I've already got the Smart Dimension button highlighted, I could continue clicking things with their dimensions. Maybe I want this to be 60 millimeters. And perhaps I want the diameter of this hole to be 10. Well, now you can see I've changed the geometry and the dimensions of these things. And if I click that again, it's changed it. Once again, if I go back to edit the sketch, perhaps that hole isn't exactly where I want it. I can go back to Smart Dimension. I can click the center of the hole and the line, and I can make that 20 millimeters. I can click the center of the hole and that line. Whoops. Click Smart Dimension again. You'll find that there's weird things happen when you click things twice. Click that hole, and there's the horizontal dimension. And I can, before I click the mouse, I can wiggle this numerical dimension around anywhere I like. And that's just moved that hole to a different spot. And there you have it. The hole is moved. So with this, we've been able to create a cube and a hole. We'll stop there, and we'll move on from this in the next video. See you in a few minutes.